Well, hello, Living Grace Community Church family. It's the middle of the week, and I'm looking forward to sharing something with you in a few moments that's actually taken from the middle of an Old Testament book that we probably seldom read, but a great message for us that we need at this time as we're facing the pressures of life. But first, I do want to give you a reminder about something that's going to happen this coming Sunday. Being that this is the first Sunday of the month, May 3rd, we are going to again share communion remotely. When you join us by video watching our worship service, there'll be a time within that we're going to take communion together. I want to encourage you to prepare yourself for that time. Look at your heart. What is God speaking to you about? I would encourage you to read Isaiah chapter 53 in preparation for our time around the Lord's table. And of course, we do want you to have bread or crackers or juice or whatever you have available so that when it comes time and we participate, you'll know that you're joining with other members of our church family from their homes, also sharing together around the Lord's table. Now, this past Sunday, when we were having our great time of worship, Luke led us in singing a beloved old hymn, "Great is Thy Faithfulness." Now, many people probably don't realize that hymn and its wording, at least part of it, is taken from an Old Testament book, the book of Lamentations. Now, Lamentations is a little 5-chapter book that comes immediately after the book of Jeremiah. In fact, the Lamentations was written by Jeremiah. And it's a very creatively done book. It's actually Hebrew poetry. It's grouped in different, they call strophes, and some of them are actually alphabetic acrostic, so it starts with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet and moves to the second and so forth through the Hebrew alphabet. And one of the things that makes a book like that very interesting is to see what does the biblical author intentionally place in the very center, the very fulcrum of the passage? Because often that's maybe the most significant thing that he wants to communicate. Well, that's exactly what we find in Lamentations. Near the very heart of this book, in Lamentations chapter 3, we hear a message from Jeremiah about the God that he served and followed that all of us need to hear. Now, he had good reason, by the way, to lament what was going on. At the time that he wrote this book, the nation of Israel was on the verge of falling to the invading armies of the Babylonians. It was a horrible time. There was war, there was famine, there was violence, there was corruption, there was idolatry, there was all kinds of serious problems going on in the country. And on top of all that, Jeremiah, who had been a faithful preacher and proclaimer of God's truth and God's message to the people of Israel, had done it to an audience who wanted to hear none of it. They rejected what he says. There was almost no one during Jeremiah's entire ministry that turned in faith to God. Surely it had to have been incredibly discouraging to him. And so let's remind ourselves, as challenging as the times we are facing and the pressures of life that we're facing, what Jeremiah faced at that time really was far worse than we can possibly imagine. But as I said, intentionally placed in the very core and center of this book are some wonderful verses that I believe can be a help to us as we face the pressures of life. But I want to begin in Lamentations chapter 3 and read verses 19 and 20 because we again hear the pain of the prophet. He said, "I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me." You hear this means deep pain and struggle. But what does he say immediately after this? In verse 21 he begins and he says, "Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope." What is it? He said, "Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation or the deliverance of the Lord. And so what Jeremiah shares is something that we need to hear as we face the pressures of life. That in the midst of those things, as difficult as they are, as painful as they are, we have a God whose love and compassion never fails. He's faithful. He is a God of salvation. And so if you're struggling with things, and I know we all are to some degree, I encourage us at this time to turn to him and to remember what Jeremiah said about the Lord. Great is your faithfulness. Let's keep trusting our faithful God.